The town of Millersville had always been picturesque during the holidays, but that Christmas morning in 1988 felt almost unreal. Thick layers of fresh snow blanketed the streets, muffling every sound except for the occasional crunch of boots on frozen pavement. Streetlights cast a warm amber glow over frosted windows, and the aroma of cinnamon, pine, and wood smoke drifted from every home. Children ran excitedly through yards, their laughter ringing like tiny bells in the crisp winter air, while parents called after them, bundled in coats and scarves, clutching steaming mugs of cocoa. Inside the Johnson household, the excitement was almost unbearable. The children, Emily and Jacob, had been waiting for this day for months. Emily, 12, could barely contain her excitement as she tore through wrapping paper, her eyes wide with wonder at the gifts inside. Jacob, 9, bounced around the living room, shaking every package like it might jump open and reveal its secrets on its own. Their parents, Tom and Sarah, watched with quiet smiles, taking photos to capture the fleeting moments that families across the country cherished each year. The family breakfast was a warm, chaotic scene. Pancakes piled high with syrup, bacon sizzling in the pan, and orange juice spilling onto the table as the children argued over who got the biggest piece. Outside, the snow continued to fall gently, coating rooftops and bare trees in sparkling white. The radio played classic Christmas carols, adding a nostalgic soundtrack to the morning, while neighbors waved from their driveways, exchanging cheerful greetings. It was, by every measure, a perfect Christmas morning, a snapshot of happiness that could have belonged in a holiday postcard. By mid-morning, the Johnsons were preparing for the church service at St. Mary's, the old stone building at the edge of town that had hosted generations of families for decades. Tom carefully loaded the children into the family car, brushing snow from their coats and making sure every mitten and scarf was in place. Sarah carried her camera, hoping to capture the magic of the day through her lens. The family laughed as they trudged through the snow, unaware that every joyful step was taking them toward a morning that would soon become the town's darkest memory. As they approached the church, the sunlight glinted off the snow in blinding bursts, reflecting off the tall stained glass windows. The air grew inexplicably colder, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the day so far. Inside, the church smelled of aged wood, candle wax, and faint incense, a comforting, familiar scent that had always welcomed families like the Johnsons. Parishioners greeted one another with smiles and hugs, their breath visible in the cold air of the unheated hall. From the outside, it appeared to be just another perfect Christmas morning. But beneath the cheerful greetings and festive decorations, a subtle unease lingered, an almost imperceptible tension that no one could yet name. The Johnsons arrived at St. Mary's Church just as the morning sunlight struck the tall spires, glinting off the frosted windows like shards of glass. Inside, the congregation had gathered, exchanging cheerful greetings, but there was something strange in the air, a faint draft that seemed out of place, and a sudden hush that fell over the room as the family stepped through the doors. Emily clutched her mother's hand, while Jacob's eyes darted around nervously, sensing a subtle shift in the atmosphere he couldn't yet understand. Tom offered a reassuring smile, but even he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this year. As the service began, the priest's voice echoed through the cavernous church, carrying a melody of familiar hymns. The Johnsons took their seats near the front, their small family huddled together. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and making the old building groan under the weight of age and snow. Inside, though, the warm glow of candlelight and the polished wooden pews should have been comforting. But then, mid-sermon, the lights flickered, a brief, almost imperceptible dimming that sent a shiver down the spines of the congregation. Some whispered about a blown fuse or an electrical hiccup, but no one could explain why the temperature in the front rows suddenly plummeted. Emily's eyes widened as she noticed shadows moving in ways that didn't match the people around her. Jacob whispered a question to his father, but Tom shushed him, insisting it was just a trick of the candlelight. Sarah, adjusting her camera to capture the choir, felt a sudden chill run through her, a sensation of being watched that made the hairs on her neck stand on end. The warmth that had filled the morning seemed to vanish in an instant, replaced by a heavy, almost suffocating silence. For a moment, the world outside the church ceased to exist, leaving only the tension and the rhythmic echo of the priest's words. Then, in a heartbeat, it happened. Witnesses later described a flicker in the corner of the room, a moment when the light seemed to twist unnaturally, like smoke curling in the sunlight. When someone finally turned to look toward the Johnsons, they were gone. Chairs were pushed back, coats left behind, and an eerie cold lingered where the family had sat moments before. Panic erupted among the congregation, with people shouting and running toward the front. But there was no trace of Tom, Sarah, Emily, or Jacob. No footprints in the snow outside, no echo of a struggle, nothing but an empty pew and the chilling sense that the family had vanished into thin air. For hours, the church was sealed off, as parishioners and local authorities attempted to piece together what had just occurred. Some claimed they had heard whispers, soft and indistinct, coming from the corners of the room. Others swore they saw shadows moving along the walls, dancing just beyond the reach of the candlelight. Searchlights combed the grounds outside, but the snow showed no signs of footprints or tracks. The Johnsons had disappeared without leaving so much as a single clue, and with every passing hour, the mystery grew darker. Something unexplainable had occurred inside St. Mary's, and even the most skeptical onlookers could feel that the church itself was hiding a secret that refused to be spoken aloud. The news of the Johnson family's disappearance spread through Millersville like wildfire. By the time the police arrived at St. Mary's Church, a crowd had already gathered outside, their breath forming clouds in the icy morning air. Reporters with cameras and microphones pressed forward, eager for any scrap of information, while neighbors huddled in disbelief. Authorities quickly cordoned off the church, treating it as a potential crime scene. Officers went over every inch of the building, tapping the walls, checking the basement, and photographing every pew. But even as they meticulously searched, the questions multiplied. How could an entire family vanish from a crowded church during broad daylight? Detectives scoured the surrounding area, combing through the snowy streets and nearby woods with flashlights and search dogs. They followed the faint tracks of parishioners who had entered the church that morning, hoping to catch some sign of the Johnsons' movement afterward. But the snow outside the church was pristine, undisturbed by footprints beyond those of people who had left in panic. The river nearby was frozen solid, the woods dense and empty, and abandoned buildings showed no sign of forced entry or hidden passageways. Even the town's roads, slick with ice and snow, offered no clue. It was as if the family had evaporated into thin air. Local authorities interviewed every eyewitness, from the children seated in nearby pews to the choir members and the priest himself. Everyone gave eerily consistent accounts. The Johnsons had entered the church, sat quietly, and then disappeared. But there were strange inconsistencies too. Some claimed to have heard faint whispers echoing through the building. Others swore they saw shadows that shouldn't have existed. The priest mentioned a sudden chill that swept through the room mid-sermon, and a few parishioners reported that the candles flickered in unison, as if reacting to an unseen force. Yet, no physical explanation could account for any of it. Days turned into weeks as search parties expanded beyond the town limits. Helicopters scanned frozen rivers and the dense Pennsylvania forests, dogs sniffed abandoned barns and sheds, and volunteers combed through every inch of the nearby countryside. Still, no trace of the Johnsons was found. Letters, clothing, and personal belongings were left untouched at the church and at their home, offering no clues. The deeper authorities dug, the stranger it became. There was no evidence of foul play, no struggle, and no sign that anyone had been kidnapped. Millersville had never faced a mystery like this, and the town's unease began to grow into fear. By the end of the first month, the case had attracted attention beyond Millersville. State investigators arrived, bringing in forensic specialists and paranormal consultants, all hoping to explain what had happened. Every theory, from accidental disappearance to supernatural intervention, was debated in hushed tones. The church was combed for hidden rooms, secret passages, and old tunnels, but none were found. The investigation, thorough as it was, seemed to hit an invisible wall, leaving only one undeniable fact. The Johnson family had vanished without a trace, and the heart of the mystery seemed to lie inside the old church itself, quietly watching, waiting, and holding its secret. St. Mary's Church had stood at the edge of Millersville for well over a century, its grey stone walls weathered by snow, wind, and time. On the outside, it looked like any other small-town church, a place of worship, of comfort, and of community gatherings. But the locals knew there was more to the building than met the eye. Stories had been passed down from generation to generation, whispered on winter nights around fireplaces. Tales of strange disappearances, odd rituals, and unexplained occurrences surrounded the church like a shadow, though most dismissed them as folklore, exaggeration, or the imagination of children. Older residents spoke cautiously, recalling that the church had been built on land that once belonged to a wealthy, secretive family with rumored ties to occult societies. Some claimed that the family had commissioned the church not just as a place of worship, but as a gathering point for their own clandestine ceremonies. Rumors of hidden chambers, secret tunnels, and ritualistic symbols carved into the old pews circulated quietly among the townspeople. But with each passing decade, the stories faded into the background of everyday life, becoming nothing more than cautionary tales told during late-night storytelling. The Johnson family, like most newcomers, knew nothing of these whispers. To them, St. Mary's was simply the church they would attend every Christmas, a symbol of community and tradition. But locals who had lived through similar events swore that the church had a way of revealing its darkest secrets only to those who were drawn inside by fate or misfortune. A few parishioners had reported hearing strange chants or murmurs during services, seeing shadows flicker against the stained glass windows, or feeling sudden chills in the dead of winter. Most dismissed these experiences as imagination or stress, but a small number were convinced something malevolent lingered in the church's corners. In the weeks following the Johnsons' disappearance, investigators began to dig into the church's archives, hoping to uncover a lead. Old records, long forgotten, revealed a troubling pattern. Disappearances had occurred over the decades, each coinciding with holidays or religious events. Names, dates, and brief descriptions hinted at incidents that were quickly buried and forgotten by authorities. The more investigators learned, the more it seemed that St. Mary's was not merely a backdrop to tragedy, it might have been the epicenter. Whispers of protection rituals and hidden pacts surfaced, suggesting that those who had vanished were not victims of random misfortune, but participants in something far older and far darker. Even the church's architecture seemed to hint at secrets. Narrow hallways led to dead ends, staircases ended abruptly, and certain stained glass windows depicted scenes that seemed almost out of place, with symbols that did not belong in traditional Christian imagery. Local historians noted that renovations over the years had altered some original structures, yet there were areas left untouched, hidden from plain sight. Some claimed that these untouched sections were deliberately sealed off, as if someone, or something, wanted to ensure certain rooms remained hidden. By this point, the line between legend and reality blurred. What had once been a quaint historical building now seemed like a silent witness to decades of unspoken horrors. After the Johnson family vanished, St. Mary's Church was quickly closed to the public. A heavy sense of unease settled over Millersville, and the town tried, in vain, to return to normal. The church's doors remained locked, its windows darkened, and its once festive bells fell silent. Children grew up hearing the story as a ghost tale whispered at sleepovers, while parents spoke of the incident in hushed tones, never quite revealing the details. Every Christmas, townsfolk would glance at the church, half expecting to see lights flicker inside or hear a faint cry echoing through the frosty air. But nothing ever came. The building became a shadowed monument to a mystery no one dared confront. Over the years, the legend of the Johnsons' disappearance grew. Books and articles occasionally referenced the case, drawing curious outsiders to the quiet town, but the church remained untouchable. Paranormal investigators, thrill-seekers, and journalists tried to uncover its secrets, but each attempt ended with frustration, fear, or retreat. Strange occurrences were reported by those brave enough to enter the vicinity. Flickering lights when no one was inside, whispers on the wind, doors swinging open on their own. Yet the town council refused to investigate further, fearing public panic and the revival of old fears. The building, once a symbol of community, became a reminder of the unknown and unexplainable. Locals still told their stories in fragments, passing down memories of the day the family disappeared. Some claimed to see shadowy figures through the church windows late at night, pacing in ways that didn't belong to any living person. Others swore that when they walked past the building during winter, the air around them would suddenly grow icy, their breath visible despite warm temperatures outside. Even the most skeptical townsfolk admitted that something about St. Mary's felt wrong. Over decades, these unverified sightings and chills became a part of Millersville's collective memory, building a legacy of fear that would not be shaken. The Johnson family's disappearance, though officially unsolved, began to shape the town's identity. Every holiday season, families hesitated to take walks near the church. Teenagers dared each other to approach its doors, only to retreat screaming after hearing unexplained creaks and whispers. The church had become a character in its own right, a silent, brooding presence looming over Millersville, quietly daring anyone to uncover its secrets. Meanwhile, the families of the missing never received closure, living decades haunted by unanswered questions and the faint hope that one day the truth might emerge. Time did not soften the mystery, it sharpened it. As years turned into decades, every renovation, inspection, or news story only highlighted the gaps in understanding. Investigators from other towns came and went, their reports filed away, forgotten in dusty archives. Yet the church remained untouched, as if it had been waiting, preserved in anticipation of the day someone, or something, would finally pry open the hidden truth. 35 long years passed, and the silence grew heavier with each passing season, until that fateful year when the building itself would finally begin to reveal what had remained buried for so long. It wasn't until 2023, nearly 35 years after the Johnson family vanished, that St. Mary's Church finally revealed a fragment of its dark secret. The town council had reluctantly approved renovations, hoping to restore the historic building for community use. Workers began stripping away decades of dust, peeling paint, and rotted wood, unaware of what lay hidden beneath. On the second day of demolition, a floorboard in the altar area gave way to something unusual, a hollow space beneath the main sanctuary. When the construction crew pried it open, they discovered a narrow stone staircase spiraling down into darkness. The air that escaped was stale and heavy, carrying an odor of mildew and something far less identifiable, almost metallic. Word of the discovery spread quickly, bringing investigators, journalists, and curious onlookers to the site. Flashlights cut through the darkness of the hidden basement, revealing walls lined with cryptic symbols etched into stone. Wooden shelves, covered in dust, held objects that made even seasoned investigators uneasy. Rusted chains, old ceremonial robes, and candles melted into grotesque shapes. In one corner, a collection of photographs caught everyone off guard. They were old, faded, and yet unmistakable. The Johnson family, smiling on that last Christmas morning, as if frozen in time. Each photo was annotated with dates and names, some accompanied by unsettling notes written in looping, archaic handwriting. Among the artifacts, investigators found journals bound in leather, brittle with age. Flipping through them revealed chilling accounts of the church's past, descriptions of ceremonies, lists of names, and references to a secret society operating for generations. Some passages detailed elaborate rituals meant to protect the town by offering individuals as part of the church's hidden covenant. The Johnsons' names appeared repeatedly, tied to one particular entry dated the morning of their disappearance. The writing was meticulous, describing actions and instructions with a cold precision that suggested premeditation. Suddenly, the decades-long mystery began to take on a horrifying clarity. The family had not vanished by accident. Forensic teams were called in to analyze the space, uncovering subtle traces of human presence that had been preserved by the sealed-off basement. Faint footprints, dust patterns, and small traces of fabric fibers suggested the room had been occupied. But not recently, until the discovery itself disturbed the settled decades. Investigators also noted an unusual phenomenon. The temperature remained unnaturally low, and their equipment recorded faint electromagnetic fluctuations. Local historians, brought in to decode the symbols on the walls, were stunned to find that they aligned with rituals documented in obscure, centuries-old texts, combining Christian iconography with arcane symbols. The basement was not just a hidden room. It was a chamber of secrets meticulously maintained for decades. As the news spread beyond Millersville, the story drew national attention. Experts debated the implications, historians speculated about the church's founders, and paranormal investigators flocked to the site. The discovery of the basement, the journals, and the artifacts painted a chilling portrait. The Johnson family's disappearance was part of a much larger, darker history than anyone had imagined. The town, long haunted by silence and whispers, now faced the uncomfortable truth that the mystery they had tried to forget was embedded in the very walls of their community. And yet, even with the basement uncovered and the evidence laid bare, the full story, the how and why of that fateful Christmas morning, remained tantalizingly out of reach, as if the church itself were still holding the final piece of the puzzle. The deeper investigators dug into the hidden basement, the more unsettling the discoveries became. Among the journals and photographs, they found detailed accounts of rituals that had been performed for generations. Rituals designed to protect the town from perceived threats through means that were incomprehensible to modern minds. The entries described exact procedures, symbols, and participants, all recorded in meticulous detail. And then, in one particularly old journal, a chilling passage detailed the events of that Christmas morning in 1988, naming the Johnson family as participants in a ritual intended to ensure the town's prosperity and safety. The tone was cold, almost clinical, as if the author had been recording instructions rather than recounting events. As forensic specialists analyzed the artifacts, they noticed a pattern in the symbols etched into the walls and floor. They were aligned with astronomical positions, ancient numerology, and long-forgotten rites. Certain stains on the stone floor, previously dismissed as mold or dirt, were now confirmed to be remnants of substances used in ceremonial practices. Photographs of the Johnsons, once happy and normal, now appeared staged, each family member positioned in ways that matched the patterns described in the journals. It became horrifyingly clear that the family had not been made victims of random fate. They had been deliberately selected, and the events of that morning were premeditated in ways no one could have imagined. Interviews with surviving church members and townsfolk brought new pieces to the puzzle. Some recalled seeing strange symbols painted on walls or unusual gatherings in the church late at night. Others mentioned masked figures who had been seen entering the building for unknown purposes. While many had dismissed these accounts as imagination or exaggeration, the newly uncovered evidence proved otherwise. It seemed the church had been a hub for secret activities for decades, possibly even centuries, hidden under the guise of religious devotion. The shocking realization hit the investigators. The Johnson family's disappearance was not an isolated incident but part of a continuum of concealed horrors that had been carefully covered up for generations. Among the most disturbing revelations was the discovery of personal items belonging to the Johnsons, preserved unnaturally well in a small alcove deep within the basement. Children's toys, a school book, a camera, all exactly as they had been left that fateful Christmas morning. It was as if the family had been frozen in time, kept somewhere beyond reach, yet not destroyed. Some artifacts suggested attempts at containment, preservation, or observation rather than violence, raising questions that would haunt the investigators. Were the rituals meant to harm, or to transform, or to appease some unseen force? Each answer only seemed to open another layer of mystery. By the time the news reached the national media, the story had taken on a life of its own. Paranormal experts, historians, and criminologists debated the implications, each theory darker and more unsettling than the last. The town of Millersville, long haunted by whispers and cold shivers, now faced the undeniable truth. The church had been a vessel for secrets far beyond ordinary comprehension, and the Johnson family's fate had been intertwined with forces both human and, possibly, beyond human understanding. The building that had once seemed quaint and benign was now revealed as a silent witness to generations of hidden, calculated terror. And though investigators had uncovered most of what lay hidden, the true depth of the church's secret, and the full story of that Christmas morning, remained just out of reach, as if the shadows themselves were holding the final revelation. As investigators stepped back from the basement, the full weight of what they had uncovered began to sink in. For 35 years, St. Mary's Church had guarded its secrets silently, watching over Millersville with a calm that belied the horrors hidden within its walls. The Johnson family, taken on a Christmas morning meant for joy, had become a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that some mysteries are far older and darker than we can imagine. Even now, experts and historians can only speculate about the true nature of the rituals, the intentions behind them, and the forces that may still linger in the shadows of the old church. What happened that morning may never be fully explained, and the building itself seems to hum with a quiet, unspoken power, as if daring anyone to pry further. One thing is certain, the town will never celebrate Christmas the same way again. The story of the Johnsons is a warning. Some secrets are meant to remain buried, and some doors, once opened, reveal more than we are ready to face. So, the next time you pass an old church, or hear whispers in the wind on a winter night, remember, some shadows do not fade, and some mysteries never truly end.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.